Live now.
Thank you, Robin. I'd like to welcome everybody here, and Chanel, a special welcome to you as a new member of the committee. And I wonder if I can ask you right from the beginning to become involved and open us with a karakia.
Okay. Kei noi tātou. Whakatakata hau ki te tonga, ki whakatakata hau ki te uru, kia mākina kina kūta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chanel. And we have apologies from Matt Laurie. Are there any other apologies that have not previously been advised? If not, would somebody move that apology be sustained? Thank you, Mr. Murray. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Maurice. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. I suppose I should just comment that we probably all become a little bit used to it by now, but the normal sort of protocols of a meeting by Zoom apply. If we can all please respect those. Certainly, I think if members of the committee can keep their cameras on, I think that's useful for us all to see, and certainly makes counting votes easier. Normal situation of raise a hand to speak. My preference is that you raise the electronic hand if you want to speak, because it helps, it keeps track of that. So moving on then to the order of business, there has been an update in that, and the quarterly risk report will follow item 8 and precede the health safety at work, health and safety report. This, I think, will allow us to cover off the point of interest that is current at the moment in terms of Civic House, and I will particularly be asking the CEO to lead us through that process. Also advise that our auditor, John Mackey, will be joining the meeting during the quarterly financial report. Would give us an update on matters relating to the audit. We've got that scheduled for 11 AM, and we'll try and work things through to that, but it may well be that we have to change the we pause some item of the meeting to allow that to take place. We'll play that by ear as we proceed. So if there's no objection to that, we'll move forward. Are there any changes to the interest register or any specific items of interest that are potentially in conflict on this agenda? Thank you. That is noted. We have no public forum, Nikki? No public forum. So we'll move to confirmation of the minutes, which is, I think, page 8, is it? Excuse me, I'm going to be jumping around devices.
Through the chair, that's correct. Pages 8 to 14 of the agenda.
Thank you. Are there any changes to those? If not, would somebody move their representative true record of that meeting? Thank you, Mr. Murray. Do I have a seconder? Oh, sorry, Judine. Councillor Edgar, I see you've got your hand up. My apologies.
Yeah, I just had a question on them. Page 11, item number 8. It notes questions asked in the quarterly finance report about the Civic House ceiling tile project, and it just talks about an update that was going to be provided prior to the next meeting, outlining the timeframes for the project and assurances that risks had been mitigated. So I don't know if you want to deal with that now in the minutes, or because I think some of it is just, so I'm not aware of receiving that. And so is that a process question you want held over for later? Because it's not per se about the ceiling tiles, it's more about, do we have to make resolutions for every action asked, or, that was something clearly minuted, and yet it didn't come through. So how do you want to deal with that, Mr. Chair?
I think there will be the discussion later. I think to some extent, I'd be interested to know that the answer to that as well, and perhaps where events have taken over from that. But I think that's something that let's talk about that when we talk about the full aspect, Councillor Edgar, under the quarterly risk report.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Any other queries on the minutes? Mr. Murray.
Mr. Peters, I'm happy to move them as an accurate record, but just following up with Councillor Edgar's question, I think it's actually not a question about the matter that's directly in the minutes. There's probably a piece that is how do we ensure that actions from all meetings are brought forward and are on the radar of the committees. And I think that's probably the wider question that needs to be considered. I think whether we do it here or not, it's not a matter, but that's I think that's the point.
Yeah, well, thank you, John.
Yeah, a point well made, and thank you for that, because I was probably running the two together in a way that has a level of appropriateness, but as you say, is not the entire issue. So I am happy to discuss that now as to how do we get something enacted, and how do we know that is being fulfilled. So, Madam Mayor, and then perhaps I'll ask the CEO to comment on that, or perhaps Ms. Harrison, but I'll take the Mayor first.
Morena koutou. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I did go back and re-watch the YouTube clip of that part of the meeting after reading the minutes, and it was very clear that the committee was seeking that information in a time-bound manner that was to be prior to this meeting. How we achieve actions being delivered in a timely way is really, I would have expected that to have happened. I would have thought that would have been sufficient to, it was clearly understood, and yes, that was quite clear. I would expect that to happen. If this becomes a pattern, then we would have to consider whether we move to resolutions, time-bound resolutions, and that would be the only other mechanism I could think of. Officers may have some other mechanisms that they could think of. We could move to including an actions table in our reports, where we record we want that matter included in an actions table. Yes, that's another method. That's something that we haven't used previously, but they would be the options that I could come to today. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a comment from either Ms. Harrison or the CEO on this?
I'm happy to speak to it. I mean, I think that I was aware that that was in the minutes, and just with the workshop that was given on the Civic House project and the update that was given on the ceiling tiles project as part of that, I missed that wasn't really what the committee was asking for. So I do apologise, and I do agree that actions actually being pulled out is actually really helpful, being pulled out of the minutes or recorded as resolutions.
I'll take the Chief Executive on this, and before I go to Councillor Edgar, and then I see Councillor Noonan would like to comment as well. So,
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So our status reports are very much based on resolutions, but I think we are going to have to look more closely at whether a consensus view is recorded in the minutes about an action. I mean, I don't think the committee should have to pass a resolution for everything. We should be more responsive than that. So we'll have to look at making sure that the GM responsible reads through the the minutes, and there is an action list made up that the chair supports, and we use that as a method of making sure we hit the targets that the committee wants.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Edgar.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think that's a good step. Actions are very common in board minutes and agendas. I just think we also need to be careful on the reporting back, because the reporting back was to the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee, and we have external members that if reporting goes to a different function, the people who are seeking that information aren't necessarily getting it. So yeah, we just need to be careful that, you know, if something goes somewhere else, there are 3 externals here that wouldn't have received that information. And there were, of course, elements that weren't provided at that briefing that was sought in this report. But yeah, thank you to Pat for that suggestion. I think that's a good step forward.
Thank you, Councillor Edgar. I agree with those comments. Gail, I'm going to take the Mayor first, as I'll take the members of the committee, if that's okay. So, Mayor Rees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think there is a opportunity here that we need to be conscious of, which is around public scrutiny. So I would just note that discussing something in a workshop is not going to comply with the minutes, as Councillor Edgar has said, and it's very important that when we raise things through the committee process, that they're reported back through the committee process. This is a public process and we need to make sure that we comply with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Noonan, finally.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you allowing me to speak, being a non-member. Look, just regarding resolutions and reporting against, I have found a number over the past year that haven't been reported. I have found during my time as chair some in my area that weren't reported that I had to raise to bring back to council. So because I was finding those resolutions that hadn't been reported on, I asked if there was any mechanism that we need to provide that makes it better for the staff to be able to report. And so I'm going to ask that question again today. But I just do see it, and this is the appropriate place for that as a risk, that some of our resolutions don't get reported on. And there are still a number, unfortunately, we haven't got the staff time apparently to pick those up and to check them. So we do need, I think, a better system. So if there is a better system known to staff that is available, can they please request that so that these things can be reported on?
Thank you, Councillor Noonan. I think coming back to you, Chief, Mr. Doherty, that's something when you're looking at that process that you'll be considering whether there is some form of register or something that will help to achieve that.
Certainly, we have already made some changes to the way that actions are recorded out of the resolutions to make that more robust. I thought we were getting some resources to go back and look at resolutions through this triennium to see if there was any we'd missed. And I think probably the other step would be to run a draft of what we see as the action points past the chair before the next meeting.
Thank you. Or might I suggest even following the previous, meeting rather than sort of 2 days beforehand, and then it's something that could be confirmed at the pre-meeting preparation with chairs or something like that in a mechanism. Okay, thank you. Look, I'm very conscious that this was a process on the agenda to confirm the minutes, and we sort of sidetracked slightly there, but I think it's a useful discussion to have, and one that actually has implications sort of wider than this committee. So I allowed that to go in the hope of sort of process improvement, but and the fact that it came out in almost as a matter arising from the minutes is incidental. But Ms. Harrison, are you wanting to make a comment or no? Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if I saw your hand raised. So with that, let's come back to the point. And I think, Mr. Murray, you had been prepared to accept the minutes as a true record, notwithstanding there's an outstanding item on them, but as a record of the meeting. Do I have a seconder that reflects that? Thank you, Councillor Edgar.
Yes, and just if our conversation can be noted in the minutes, thank you.
thank you. I assume that will be happening, but it is important.
Yeah, and so happy.
So with that, if there's nothing further on that, all those in favour, please raise the hand. Thank you. That's carried. So this is where I now have to come back to my. I think the next item on the agenda is my chair's report, which I'll take as read. Really looking there to focus on the sort of challenges that are facing us, where we've got to, in what is the last meeting really of the financial year, and then of course the work of this committee ramps up a little bit in terms of around the audit process. But also, I would take this opportunity to just mention that one of the key functions of this committee, in light of sort of current affairs, if you like, is to be able to respond as flexibly as possible to matters that arise. And as such, this committee has to have a degree of flexibility around it to respond to items of risk or health and safety that are audacious enough not to comply with our general schedules. And so if that requires a little bit of flexibility and process at times in order to ensure that the work of the committee and the function of us as a monitoring body of risk and so on, then that is something that I believe is entirely appropriate for this committee. But I will move my report be received. I'm happy to, well, first of all, let me take questions on it before I do that. Is there anything arising from that? Councillor Sansom.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks very much, John, through the chair. No questions. I'm just happy to move your report. Thanks.
Thank you. As I said, I've got plenty of, I've got several items running here. So I have a mover for my report. Do I have a, so you've seconded that. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please raise a hand. If you don't mind, I'm going to raise my hand physically. I'm happy for you to all raise your electronics, but it's easier for me because of the setup that I've got here. I don't have access to a printer, so stuff that I would normally have on a printer, I've got on a screen, which is somewhat complex. But thank you. So now we'll go to the next item on the agenda, which is item 7, and it's the Privacy Act 2022 reporting. And I think Ms. Nikwata Smith is joining us for that. Welcome, Ms. Nikwata Smith, on that. And I'll hand to you to take us through the report, any updates, any points that you want to raise or emphasize. And then I'll open it up for questions.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you, Mr. Peters. I think I'll take the report as read. There are no specific updates to make at this point, but open to taking questions, this being the first of this kind of report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edgar.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. First question is, so frequently with legislation, there might be elements that are time-bound. I was just wondering if there are any time-bound elements to this legislation that we need to comply with.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor, and through the chair. There were a number of elements of the Act that were implemented immediately. For example, the changes to the requirement to mandatory reporting or notification to the Privacy Commissioner under certain circumstances. But in other ways, in terms of preparations, the Privacy Commissioner has taken the approach of working as closely as it can with organisations to make sure that they're prepared as quickly as possible, but without, or as well as possible, as thoroughly as possible, but without specific time-bound nature to it. And as far as things like the mandatory notification, that is something that we have immediately been aware of. If there are matters that have been raised to our attention that could be a potential issue, we have automatically run it through the new Notify Us tool, which is provided by the Office of the Commissioner, to check whether the threshold for serious harm is considered to have been met in that instance. So that type of thing is already underway. Thank you.
Thank you. Just my next question is 4.13 and 4.131, which was the incident with contact details being passed on to a contractor. So you're probably aware that, you know, I was the elected member contacted by the member of the public about that. And so that was a good resolution, I thought. It did make me think when I saw that are there any similar safeguards if people use Anteno or any electronic means? Because, you know, that, you know, solution fit the problem. And so that was great. But yeah, are there similar safeguards in place if they, you know, are submitting via electronic means?
I am probably not best placed to speak to the electronic receipt. That's probably more the area of our CIO, who's not available to talk this morning. But I will make a note of the question, Councillor Edgar, and specifically follow up on that just to provide reassurance.
Yeah, just an email out. I'd be more than happy with going out to the committee. And then just my final question is, it mentions at 4.15.3 staff training. I mean, that's a specific one, but yeah, mention staff training taking place. Just wondering, because elected members also get a lot of personal contact details, you know, messenger ones, email ones, etc., etc. Just wondering how the Privacy Act applies to that personal information we get provided frequently directly from people, and if that's an area where training needs to be provided for elected members on what our responsibilities and obligations are.
Great question, thank you. And through the chair, speaking specifically to the first part of that note in terms of the staff training, for clarification, that has been with individuals or very small groups of people on specific matters that have arisen at the time. We are in the process of developing a training induction presentation, which is intended for wider application to both staff and members. You're quite right, Councillor Edgar. Members are considered a part of an agency, which is the term that's used for an organisation under the Act, and so have responsibilities in terms of dealing with personal data that they are privy to around how that is held, if it's shared, when it's shared, that kind of thing. And so that is something that we're hoping to arrange a session with elected members for, as well as staff, as quickly as possible. Unfortunately and slightly ironically, the timing of the implementation of that training has been affected by other privacy actions.
No, thank you very much for that. Yeah, great answers.
Thank you, Councillor Edgar. Thank you, Mr. Guida-Smith. Are there any other questions? If there aren't, I'd ask if somebody would be prepared to move that the Privacy Act report be received. Thank you, Councillor Edgar. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Sanson. Are there any further questions on that? If not, would all those in favour please raise their hand electronically, potentially, just easier for people to do that. Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. We move now to item 8, which is the Health and Safety at Work Act and elected members. And welcome, Mr. Hughes. Morning, welcome to the meeting. Normal process, would you present your report, please update any changes or make any emphasis that you wish before I open it up for questions.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. So I don't have any changes to my report. I have kept it at high level, based on duties under the Act, rather than getting into too many specific and detailed examples, because I guess that just opens up issues with exceptions and things. But happy to take questions on the report, and that there have been a number from Councillor Edgar that I've answered by email, but if any of those feel like they need to be discussed here, I can go through those answers.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. So open it up for questions. How would you like to give us an idea of the questions that you have asked, Councillor Edgar?
Yes, certainly. So firstly, referencing 4.7, the of areas that fall under the scope, and noting that it was a non-exhaustive list, but it talked about meeting constituents at a council workplace, and significant number of our meetings are held elsewhere. So with one of them, we have meetings at TDC, Saxton, NMIT. So I did get the reassurance that those ones come under the responsibility of those PCBUs, but I guess it also led me to, should council be providing elected members with safe meeting venues inside the premises, because we don't have places to readily have meetings, and so we frequently have meetings in cafes, libraries, sitting outside. And due to COVID, I've actually had a number of constituent meetings in my house recently. And so because those areas aren't covered under someone's existing PCBU, my question is, should that then be a responsibility? Because our meetings with constituents are what I would consider part of council's ordinary business. And so therefore is the onus on council to provide us with safe meeting venues.
Mr. Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess based on the on what we understand about this is separating the governance role from the representative role, and so that the duty to council applies primarily to the governance role, as I guess one point in that. But I guess the main one is then you come down to what's reasonably practicable, and one of the things is how much influence and control does council have over what happens in an elected member's home in regard to their work, and we don't have control over that, or council doesn't have control over that. The question was, should council be providing a safe meeting places for elected members? I'm unsure of the answer on that, but once again, it probably comes down to what's reasonably practicable. Council does what it can to provide those when it can, and that's probably all I've got on that one. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. I mean, if I can, the CEO wants to comment on that, so I'll do that, and then I may have a comment as well. Mr. Dockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I thought we were providing meeting places in the customer services area, that we'd put some extra tables and chairs in there that councillors could use to meet constituents if they had concerns about their personal safety, to try and help with that issue, and certainly avoid the prospect of meeting at home. And my understanding that we had made those changes in response to concerns raised. So we have been trying to help in that area.
I'm not sure, sorry, I'm not sure if this has been clearly communicated back to elected members as to that. I could be wrong. I'm just not sure if that had been formalised back to us. But there have been COVID changes and ins and outs, so it may have been just missed in that.
And I think that perhaps about the time, well, I think one of the staff making that had some serious health issues and we may have got a little bit distracted. We'll follow up on that and make sure that those facilities are in place and an email goes out. It's just, I think we've got 2 tables and 4 or 5 chairs, but it's over on by the windows on Halifax Street, I think was what we had. I'll have, now that I've said it out loud, I have to go down there and check to make sure it's in place, and then we will send out an email to councillors letting them know that's there.
Lovely, thank you. And then my next question was in relation to 4.9, just about the duty of care to elected members, and I had queried whether an independent legal advice had been sought on the interpretation of that answer. So we would, I'm not sure if we would need to go into confidential to discuss that if there has been legal advice, and therefore it would be privileged material. So firstly, I guess I need to know is there an answer, and if so, is it legally privileged? And then meaning we would need to go into confidential to discuss it.
Mr. Hughes?
So the advice we have had, as far as we know, it is legally privileged. It may not be, but we're uncertain of that, so we should treat it as legally privileged at this point until we've, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll leave it to you, Mr. Chair. You might wish to just take any other members' questions first before we go to that. I'll leave that to you.
Well, this is exactly what I was going to suggest, Councillor Edgar, is if we could finish any other items that you might have, and any items that other members might have, during which time I would ask the governance advisors to prepare us to go into public excluded, and maybe if we need to get anybody else into the room to help us respond to that, then give them time to do that as well. Councillor Sanson.
I might ask you to come back to me. I'm just going to hold my question for now. Thanks.
Okay, were there any other questions in this space? Just want to, while we prepare to go into that, I just wanted to make the comment really after your question, Councillor Edgar, which I think is a really good question. I think this has been a very useful report in many senses, not only in terms of how of the content of it, but exactly how we approach it. And it strikes me, and as the CEO has indicated, that it's actually a sort of process by which we can point out the issues. Ricky highlights the fact that there are some aspects that are really hard for staff or officers in the organization to take control of, but the dialogue is useful and allows a joint approach to a problem, such as the one that the Chief Executive has highlighted. So I think this has been extremely useful to establish and put in place processes without there necessarily being a definitive answer, but one in which there's really a partnership in making it happen. So Robin, do I come to you now and ask for you to take us into public excluded? Before we do that, have we got the right people in the room to be able to address this? Mr. Hughes, are you in a position to do that for us, or do we need any of the legal team here?
I'm pretty sure I understand the background, and Fiona McLeod's already provided some guidance to me.
Okay, thank you. So Robin, we're in your hands to put us into public excluded. Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you, Robin.
Apologies. Through the chair, if you'd like to move and second, get a move a seconder, move into confidential for legal privilege, and give us a few minutes to do the transition, please. Mr. Whitaker, we will need to move you into the waiting room.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for your understanding there, Mr. Whitaker. I will move that we move into public excluded, or Madam Mayor?
I'd actually prefer, in this instance, given this is a subject around the health and safety of elected members, that only the staff that actually need to be in attendance and public excluded are in public excluded, please, Mr. Chair. I realise we've got some externals, but this matter, if there are staff here who don't provide advice on that sort of matter, I prefer that anyone coming into public excluded. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy to second that we go in though.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Raise your hands. Can we take a 3-minute break where we get the right people, and we'll take it from there.